Some endings come suddenly, right in the middle of success. Just last night, tens of thousands of fans were shouting along to Bodies. By morning, Dave Williams, the voice of Drowning Pool, was found lifeless in the sleeping compartment of the tour bus. 30 years old, no spotlight, no applause, only a heavy silence hanging over a journey left unfinished. When police stepped onto that bus, they found no signs of violence, no farewell note, just silence. But silence often hides a story. Friends said Dave was worn down by the brutal pace of life on the road. Others whispered about pressures he kept locked inside. What remained was little: a hotel hallway, a closed bus door, and a medical report that coldly called it a heart problem. For fans, that explanation was never enough. On stage, Dave was a storm. Off stage, he was gentle, kind, almost humble. That contrast made his death all the more puzzling. So what really happened on that bus? Was it an accident of fate, or a harsh reminder of the cost of chasing a dream? Stay with me as we follow the traces he left behind. Chapter 1. From a small-town darkness to the stage lights. On an old wooden desk in Princeton, scraps of paper were once found with Dave's handwriting. They always ended with 2 words: on stage. A small habit, yet haunting. As if, for him, every road led back to the stage. Princeton, Texas. A modest town where most people tied their lives to steady jobs and simple routines. Dave Williams grew up there, in a working-class family. His father labored with his hands. His mother cared for the children. No one could have guessed that the skinny boy, with the gentle smile, carried a hunger that stretched far beyond the dusty streets of his hometown. As a teenager, Dave fell in love with heavy music. He would sit for hours in his room, listening to Iron Maiden or Pantera, turning the volume up so high that neighbors complained it was too loud. For Dave, music wasn't just a hobby. It was an escape, a way to feel fully alive. Step outside that room, and he looked like a friendly, easygoing young man. Friends remembered how he was always smiling, always reaching out to help. But when it came to the future, Dave saw only one path: music. He sang in smoky Dallas bars, played with nameless bands. Some nights, the crowd was just a handful of people. Some even booed. Still, he performed as if he stood before an ocean of fans. One night, Pantera's Dimebag Darrell happened to catch his show. Afterward, he looked at Dave and said, "This guy was born to be on stage." From then on, the nickname stuck. Stage. A friend later recalled how Dave used to joke, "I only feel alive when the lights hit me. Otherwise, there's not much." At first, it sounded like the exaggeration of a young rocker. But paired with those notes always ending in "on stage," it sends a chill. Did he truly believe his life only existed there? In Dallas, Dave became a familiar face. He stayed after shows to sign ticket stubs, scribble personal notes, nearly always closing with those same 2 words. Looking back, those scraps of paper feel less like casual autographs and more like fragments of a code, a quiet sign of a life tethered to the spotlight, yet fragile beneath it. In 1999, Drowning Pool was searching for a singer. The moment Dave stepped into the audition, everyone knew he was the missing piece. His ferocious voice, explosive stage presence, and natural magnetism left no room for doubt. Stage was no longer just a nickname. It was destiny. And yet, within that light, he was still the boy from Princeton, wrapping his whole existence into 2 words: on stage. Someone once whispered, "From the very beginning, Dave lived as if tomorrow would never come." Perhaps his story carried the shadow of an early ending all along. Chapter 2. A small room, scattered notes, and a strange prophecy. In 2001, the name Drowning Pool began to echo far beyond Dallas. They had just signed with Wind Up Records, the same label as Creed, and released their debut album, Sinner. Dave, the man who once scribbled the words "on stage" on scraps of paper, was now standing exactly there, before thousands of people. The song Bodies exploded into a phenomenon. Heavy riffs, a chorus repeating like a battle cry. Let the bodies hit the floor. Crowds dove into mosh pits, crashing into one another, falling, then rising again. The song wasn't about war or death. It was about raw energy, the chaos and release of a live show. But as often happens, people heard what they wanted to hear. That summer, Bodies was everywhere, on radio, on MTV, even blasting through WWE arenas. Drowning Pool was hailed as the breakout act of Ozfest 2001. Dave's long hair, his fierce growl, and commanding stage presence made him an instant symbol of nu metal's rise. It was a leap so sudden, even he seemed surprised. Then came September 11th, 2001. America was shaken. The towers fell. Grief covered the nation. And in that moment, Bodies took on a darker meaning. Its words, "Let the bodies hit the floor," were deemed too sensitive. Clear Channel, one of the largest radio networks, placed the song on its list of inappropriate tracks. Can you imagine that shock? Only weeks before, the song had sent audiences into a frenzy. Overnight, it was branded a symbol of tragedy. In an interview, Dave tried to stay calm. He said, "It's just a song about the mosh pit, but we understand why people feel the way they do. If pulling it back for a while helps, we're fine with that." Outwardly, he accepted it, but those close to him said the pressure weighed heavily. He knew Bodies was their signature song. If it was silenced, the band's future could collapse with it. There's a detail few mention. Before September 11th, Dave often said how proud he was to hear Bodies played everywhere. After that day, he rarely spoke about it. Some nights, he sat backstage in silence, his trademark smile gone. One friend recalled, he carried himself like a man accused, as if a single song had somehow made him responsible for a nation's grief. And yet, the misunderstanding only made the song larger. By year's end, Bodies was back on the airwaves, stronger than before. Sinner went platinum, and Drowning Pool vaulted into the ranks of major bands. Dave, the young man who once scrawled "on stage" in private notebooks, was now a star in every sense. But fame that comes too fast often leaves hidden fractures. The smile stayed on Dave's face, but when asked about Bodies, his eyes sometimes drifted away. The song that lifted him to the top also chained him to an image of violence and intensity, an image he wasn't sure he wanted. A journalist once wrote, "Dave looked like a man trapped inside his own song." At the time, it sounded poetic, but when held against those nights of quiet backstage silence, the words feel chilling. Perhaps, from the moment Bodies rose to the top, it also sowed the seeds of the tragedy to come. When one song became a shadow, he could never escape. Chapter 3. When Bodies lifted the band and drew the spotlight. Everyone who met Dave said the same thing. He was one of the kindest men in music. No arrogance, no pretense. A fan from Princeton remembered how, whenever Dave came home, he stopped by his old school, greeted teachers, and signed autographs for the kids. He never turned down a hug or a signature, the fan recalled. To his audience, Dave wasn't just a singer. He was living proof that a small-town boy could stand on the world stage without losing his gentle smile. But behind that smile, there was more than most realized. Close friends remembered Dave hated doctors. He often joked, "Unless I break an arm, I'm not going to the hospital." It sounded like humor, but only weeks before his death, Dave began complaining of chest pain. He shrugged it off, saying it came from leaping off speakers at Ozfest and straining a muscle. He dismissed it. No one suspected it was his heart. A bandmate recalled, he clutched his chest and winced, but then laughed, said it was nothing but sore muscles. I didn't think twice. Looking back, his eyes told a different story. Those fragments of memory leave haunting questions. Did Dave already sense his body was betraying him, but kept it hidden so the show would go on? Because for Dave, the stage was everything. A colleague remembered him saying, "I don't want to let people down. They bought tickets to see us. No matter how much it hurts, I'll sing." Noble words, but also dangerous. They revealed a man willing to sacrifice his health for music. There was also a curious habit friends spoke of. After some shows, Dave sat alone for long stretches, jotting something on a slip of paper before tucking it away. When asked, he smiled and brushed it off. Just reminders. Later, those notes were found. They all ended the same way, with 2 words, "on stage." To the public, Dave was a powerful rocker, screaming into the mic. To his friends, he was private, carrying pains he never voiced. His smile became a mask. Some remembered nights, when long after everyone had gone to sleep, Dave sat awake in the bus, a small television flickering on his weary face. No one asked. He never explained. Can you picture it? A rising star, with a platinum debut album, and a song played across the nation, yet sitting quietly on the tour bus, clutching his chest, telling no one. That silence now feels like the most chilling clue of all. Was the gentle smile, the kindness, and the warmth he gave to fans really a way to hide his own suffering? Or did he truly believe that sheer willpower could carry him through? Perhaps his silence and that ever-present smile covered up the final signals of a heart that was already failing. Chapter 4: The Stage Lights and a Hidden Illness. On the night of August 13th, 2002, Drowning Pool had just finished a roaring show in Noblesville, Indiana. The crowd screamed wildly. Bodies thundered like a storm. Backstage, Dave smiled, hugged fans one by one, and returned with the band to the tour bus. There was no wild party, no drugs, none of the excess people so often imagine about metal bands. One crew member remembered clearly, "We just watched DVDs." Around 5 in the morning, I turned off the TV in Dave's bunk when I saw he had fallen asleep. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. The next afternoon, August 14th, the bus pulled up to the Holiday Inn in Manassas, Virginia. The band prepared to check in for that night's show. Everyone climbed off the bus, except Dave. The tour manager went back to call him. At 4:15, the door to the bunk opened. Dave was lying there, still as if in deep sleep. But his heart had already stopped for good. News spread like lightning. A rising star, only 30 years old, gone in a tour bus at the very height of success. The press swarmed. Local headlines speculated. Drugs, alcohol, choking in his sleep. The familiar rock and roll tragedies. No one waited for the coroner's findings. They just wanted a shocking story. But weeks later, the official report stunned everyone. No drugs, no alcohol, no evidence of choking. Just one stark diagnosis: hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, an enlarged and weakened heart muscle that suddenly failed. Can you picture the silence in that bus that afternoon? No music, no laughter. Only the body of a man who seemed so strong and full of life, taken too soon. His bandmates stood frozen, unable to speak. Some whispered about scraps of paper that slipped from Dave's pocket when his body was taken. No one ever confirmed what was written, but rumors claimed at least one still ended with the same two words: on stage. If true, even at the very end, he left behind that one reminder of the place where he lived his life most fully. But the questions remain. Why had his earlier chest pains not raised alarms? Why did a man in the middle of triumph pass away in such absolute silence? Perhaps in the whirlwind of the music industry, where everything moves at relentless speed, no one had time to stop and listen. That night, at the Nissan Pavilion near Washington, Ozfest turned into a memorial. Tens of thousands of fans screamed, but this time, Dave was no longer on stage. Only an empty space remained, cold and impossible to accept. Was his death merely a tragic heart condition, or also the hidden cost of a music machine that drove him to the edge, unseen? Chapter 5. Fame at its peak, as the body betrays. In the days after Dave's death, newspapers rushed in with familiar headlines: singer dies of drug overdose, chokes in his sleep. No evidence, only assumption. To the public, a young rocker dying could only mean excess. Weeks later, the autopsy erased every rumor. No cocaine, no alcohol, no choking. Just one clinical verdict: hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. The tour manager recalled, "We just watched DVDs. Around 5 in the morning, I turned off the TV in Dave's bunk. There was no party, nothing at all." But the rumors refused to die. Some fans swore they heard Dave shout, "I love cocaine," from the stage. An isolated memory repeated until it sounded like fact. Online, false photos circulated, claiming to show his body in a black bag. Though proven fake, such images, once seen, are never forgotten. His friends were angry. They knew Dave wasn't that man. Yet they also knew the public prefers a tale of sinful downfall over the simple truth of a quiet death from heart disease. A gentle rocker dying in silence. Some found it too ordinary to believe. One detail troubled people the most. Before his death, Dave had complained of chest pain, but no one forced him to see a doctor. Maybe the touring schedule was too demanding. Or maybe Dave himself hid it, afraid it would hurt the band. A bandmate remembered, he didn't want to be a burden. He'd rather die on stage than be seen as weak. Set beside the scraps of paper, with those familiar words, "on stage," that memory becomes haunting. Did Dave believe too deeply in the image he had built? That his life only counted under the lights? From then on, fact and rumor became entwined, blurring the truth. On one side, a clinical report. On the other, scattered memories and endless speculation. And between them, a shadow that lingers still. Did Dave leave because of a heart that failed him? Or is there more hidden behind the silence that followed? Chapter 6. Dying on Tour. Fate or Choice. On August 17th, 2002, the tour bus of Drowning Pool pulled up outside a small hotel in Manassas, Virginia. Inside, in the narrow sleeping quarters, Dave Williams lay motionless. His body was growing cold, as if his heart had quietly betrayed him in the middle of the road. No drugs, no alcohol, no party noise. Just a silent, unexpected death in what should have been the brightest days of his career. The news spread quickly, and many fans refused to believe it. Dave was only 28, standing at the very peak of his success. Just weeks earlier, he had been roaring across the stage at Ozfest, fronting one of the most talked-about nu metal bands in America. And then, in a single night, everything collapsed. The autopsy confirmed he had died from a congenital heart condition, something he had carried since childhood but rarely spoke about. Friends recalled how he always avoided medical checkups, calling them off-limits, as if he knew that any diagnosis could take away the one thing that mattered most: his place on stage. That detail made many remember Princeton, where in a small room he once scribbled the same words over and over: on stage. For Dave, being up there meant more than anything, even his own health. Dying in a tour bus, still on the road, seemed almost like the prophecy fulfilled. For Drowning Pool, it was a wound that never healed. They had just stepped into the spotlight with Bodies, just begun to secure a place on the global rock map, when their voice was taken away. Every stage that followed felt empty, as if the scream still echoed somewhere, but the man behind it would never return. His death left more questions than answers. Did Dave know the risk, but accept it anyway? Or was he simply a victim of a merciless fate? Many fans believe that in some way he chose this path, burning bright on stage, only to fall when the music was still ringing in his head. In that tour bus, Dave Williams did not just die as a young singer. He became a symbol of rock's harshest price, a short life lived entirely for music until the very last breath. Conclusion: a brief legend and unanswered questions. The story of Dave's stage. Williams ended like a short guitar riff that lingers long after the sound fades. He never had the chance to build a long career, never released dozens of albums to define an era. Yet with one scream, one song, he carved his name into the memory of a generation. The greatest paradox lies here. A boy who spent much of his childhood in hospitals fighting to survive, only to fall in the very tour bus where he had finally touched his dream. A lifetime of struggle to stand on stage, and when he finally made it, time gave him only a few fleeting months. What remains is the memory of a man. Friends and fans alike remember Dave not only as the voice of Bodies, but as a kind soul, caring for his family, patient with every fan. In a rock world filled with chaos and scandal, he offered something rare: decency. And that made his loss all the more painful. 2 decades have passed, and Princeton still holds a memorial for him each year. The teenagers who once followed his music are grown now, yet whenever that familiar riff plays, they remember Dave as part of their own youth. And so, the lingering question is not simply how famous Bodies became, but how we should remember Dave Williams. Was he a symbol of heavy metal, or just a good young man who never lived his dream to the fullest? Perhaps it is that unfinished story that keeps his name echoing through the history of American rock.